we want to continue to supply funding to law enforcement in counties that refuse to implement state and federal gun laws? Red flag laws are wildly popular, right? You're just temporarily taking guns away from people that.
So you want to withhold money for law enforcement?
I think we have to have a conversation about whether we can continue to fund law enforcement in states where they are refusing to implement these gun laws.
Democratic Senator Chris Murphy is furious with law enforcement failing to enforce gun laws, including red flag laws, and wants to have a discussion about potentially stripping federal funding from police departments that refuse to enforce such laws. In fact, why don't we take a listen to his argument with more context? Let's watch.
Virginia and Colorado, where these mass shootings took place over the last 10 days or so, they already have red flag laws in place and they did not prevent those mass shootings.
What we've, I think, learned in Colorado is that the county in which this shooting happened is a so-called Second Amendment sanctuary state. And I think the country's gonna have to learn about what's going on in this country. The majority of counties in this country have declared that they are not going to enforce state and federal gun laws. They have decided that they are going to essentially refuse to implement laws that are on the books. That is a growing problem in this country. And I think we're gonna have to have a conversation about that in the United States Senate. Do we wanna continue to supply funding to law enforcement in counties that refuse to implement state and federal gun laws?
Now, Cenk, I know you have some strong thoughts on whether or not defunding police departments makes sense in this context. But first, let me give you some details, some stats here. And I think the comparative stats with Colorado Springs versus Denver is illuminating, to say the least. So Murphy is correct that so-called sanctuary gun counties exist, and Colorado Springs happens to be one of them. Of 64 counties in the state of Colorado, El Paso County, home to Colorado Springs, is one of at least 37 counties that have declared themselves a Second Amendment sanctuary and openly defied the state's gun laws. El Paso County's commissioners did so in response to the state's proposed red flag laws in 2019. In fact, let's give you a statement from Bill Elder. He is the El Paso County Sheriff who says, we're not going to pursue these on our own, meaning potential red flag cases. And he said that as the law was being debated in the state legislature, meaning that Sheriff's office is not going to run over and try to get a court order. Elder has said that the Sheriff's office would enforce court orders, but that it wouldn't pursue petitions on its own, except in some extreme circumstances. Because remember, in order for someone who might have violence issues, mental health issues, someone who isn't suited to own a lethal weapon like a gun, well, that case needs to be made. A petition needs to be made in regard to that individual, and it can be filed by law enforcement, which in this case, the sheriff's department is like, we ain't gonna do it, or friends and family of the individual in question. Now, Elder has been true to his word. So take a look at these stats, it's incredible. In Colorado, red flag petitions can be filed by law enforcement or a family or household member. An analysis of court records by 9 News found that between January of 2020, when the law went into effect, and November of 2021, just 39 risk protection order petitions were filed in El Paso County, the most populous county in the state with more than 737,000 residents. Only 8 of those petitions, or 21%, were granted. And guess what? Not a single one of them was filed by law enforcement. Again, that's in El Paso County, where Colorado Springs is. By contrast, in less populous Denver County to the north, law enforcement and family filed 63 petitions, and judges issued a risk protection order in 79% of those cases. Of the 50 orders approved, 47 were filed by law enforcement. So Murphy has a point here. When he says that the majority of counties in the United States are sanctuary counties, that's not true. We don't know that. But we do know that at least, as I mentioned earlier, there are 37 counties that have declared themselves gun sanctuaries. Cenk.
Yeah, So there's three different issues in this story. Issue number one, should the local authorities abide by red flag laws? Of course they should. And this is a perfect example of, unfortunately, what happens when they don't. This Yahoo Sheriff Elder thought, well, gun rights are the most important thing. I'm gonna interpret the Constitution on my own, okay? And I say, oh, screw protecting people. Okay, that guy, by the way, that guy threatened to kill cops and said he had a bomb and he was gonna blow up the whole house and God knows what else in the neighborhood. And that idiot sheriff is like, I don't see a danger. I think you should be allowed to own guns. Okay, so not enforcing red flag laws is a disastrous idea. Number two, this idea of the sanctuary cities. Okay, so now remember, guys, shoe on the other foot, you always have to be ideologically principled, okay? Because there's sanctuary cities in regards to immigration laws, okay? And those are on the left. So what is the correct standard for sanctuary cities? It has to apply to both, right? And so the reality is that, yes, local law enforcement does have some flexibility when it comes to things where they have to be proactive and where they have discretion, okay? So now there is one giant difference in how it's applied between the Second Amendment ones and the immigrant ones. In the case of the sanctuary cities and immigrants, what the local authorities, and remember it's the cops that are mainly saying it, are saying, no, we don't want to ask for their papers and do the law enforcement job, not of ours, but of the federal authorities and immigration divisions within the federal government, right? And the reason we don't want to do it is if I'm going to investigate a rape or a murder or something else, and they're worried that I'm going to ask for their papers, they're not going to talk to me.
Exactly.
So the cops need that as a tool to protect everyone, not just immigrants, but the non-immigrant community too. In the case of the Second Amendment one, the local cops, sheriffs mainly, are saying, yeah, this puts the community in greater danger. And it puts even me and my guys in greater danger, but I don't care. Because of my personal opinion about the Second Amendment, I'm gonna say I'm not gonna follow it. Now, does he have the authority to not follow it? Well, I think he does, under the same concept of sanctuary cities when it comes to immigrants. But is it the correct decision? No, it is not the correct decision, because all of those sheriffs are purposely choosing to make their communities unsafe, and that's exactly what happened in Colorado, right? And then the last part of it is the framing. And that's the politics, not the policy, right? When it comes to the politics, there's a lot of ways to frame this so that you put the onus on the sheriffs and make them look like bad guys, which they are, right? But instead, Chris Murphy framed it as, if they don't do as we tell them, we're gonna take away funding from cops, which sounds like defund the police, which is an electoral disaster. Okay, so you could say, no, Cenk, I love it, and we should run into an issue where it polls at 20%, and we should choose to lose elections because of that. But I would disagree, okay?
Can I just jump in real quick? Why not pass like a federal law that would punish like the sheriff's departments that refuse to enforce the laws, right? Or the state, right? Like the state lawmakers, the state legislature should have some concern over the fact that local sheriff's departments are refusing to enforce the laws that they have passed through their legislature. Like this whole thing about, okay, this is our default one-size-fits-all response to cops we don't like, let's defund them. Okay, but we're having a conversation about cutting funding to a social service that is flawed, but is that supposed to keep the community safer? I don't get it.
Yeah, so the sanctuary stuff's a little bit tougher because it's really on the edge of their discretion. But there's oftentimes when cops do the blue flu where they just don't show up to work because their feelings were hurt. Oh, there was protests of us. Oh yeah, then we're not gonna show up. And there's 1,000 other ways that cops disobey orders that come from a legal source, right? Whether it's the mayor, the governor, whoever it might be, right? See, what I would do instead if I was a Democrat is say, look, I'm going to get more funding for mental health treatment so that this doesn't all land on the cops' doorstep. I might even do more funding for police depending on the situation, but it would be tailored towards things that are actually lead to reform, right? But I'm also going to fire the guys that are not following the law.
In a freaking heartbeat.
Yeah, and I don't know, like they're so deathly afraid of doing that, especially Democratic mayors. Like they huff and puff sometimes about police, and sometimes they do counterproductive reform, right? But what they never do is actually hold the police accountable. I've never seen it. Never, right? So when you say, hey, there's a guy who's not the cops in general, not making the community feel unsafe. No, that guy and that guy and that guy are not doing their jobs. They're fired. They're fired. It's that simple. But when it comes to cops, they get so nervous. Oh my God, they have a strong union, and oh my God, the publicity will be bad. Well, grow a pair and be a leader.
Yeah, and look, there is a difference between a police department and a sheriff's department because a sheriff is elected. And here in Los Angeles, a ballot measure just passed during the midterm elections that indicates that the Board of Supervisors can basically do away with the elected sheriff if he's found engaging in any kind of misconduct, right? Now, I don't know how I feel about that ballot initiative overall because an unelected body of people making that kind of decision about an elected individual doesn't make me feel too great. But at the same time, I do think there needs to be some system of checking an elected sheriff who's refusing to do his job, which is definitely the case when it comes to this particular sheriff in El Paso County, Colorado.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.